I always thought my father was a complicated man, not cruel, not careless, just silent. The kind of silence that makes a child question if love is something they have to earn. I was 7 when I first understood that silence had rules. You don't ask where the money went. You don't ask why mom cries behind closed doors. You just smile when guests arrive and say, everything's fine. But everything was never fine. Still, I became good at pretending. I learned early how to fill the empty spaces in our house with fake joy, fake laughter. Because when the silence grew too loud, I feared it would swallow me whole. And then one day, the silence did exactly that. It was a Tuesday, cloudy, dull, ordinary. I came home from work, tired, shoes soaked from the rain, and I found an empty house. No note, no call, no be right back. Just gone, my father. Edward Lawson disappeared without a trace. And along with him, over $1 million, savings, investments, emergency funds gone overnight. The accounts were drained. Our lawyer couldn't explain. The police shrugged, and I froze. Not just in shock, but in shame, because when something like that happens, something so impossible, so violating, people don't ask what happened. They ask what you did to deserve it. And I didn't have an answer. My mother had died 2 years earlier from cancer. She was the only softness in our house. The only voice that ever said, I love you without sounding like it cost something. After her death, I became the caretaker. Of the house, of my father, of the fragile illusion that we were still whole. But now, he'd taken everything and vanished. No forwarding address, no phone call, no explanation. And yet, I wasn't entirely surprised, because deep down, I knew he had secrets. I just didn't know one of those secrets was me. I couldn't sleep for days after it happened. I'd lie in bed replaying old conversations, looking for clues I might have missed. That last morning, he made coffee like usual, wore his watch on the wrong wrist, said my name with a softness that felt almost foreign. He even looked at me, really looked like he was memorizing my face. Now I understand why. I was his final goodbye. But the real story, the warning he left behind, didn't come in the form of a letter or a voicemail. It came in the most unexpected way. 3 weeks after he vanished, a small envelope arrived in the mail, no return address. Just my name, handwritten. Inside, there was no apology, no confession, only a key, and a single sentence written on yellowed paper. You were never supposed to find out, but now you must. At first, I thought it was a prank, a sick joke, but something about the handwriting, sharp, deliberate, hauntingly familiar, made my fingers tremble. I kept the key for days without touching it again. I hid it in a drawer like it might explode, but it burned in my thoughts. What did he mean, find out what? And then, on the 7th night, I had the dream. I was walking through our childhood basement, except it looked nothing like I remembered. The walls were lined with boxes labeled in my mother's handwriting. A woman's voice, not hers, but close, whispered, "It's not what he took. It's what he left behind." I woke up gasping. I got in my car and drove for 2 hours back to our old family cabin. It had been empty for years. Dust-covered furniture, rusted kitchen sink, my mother's scarf still hanging on the door. I stood in the center of the living room and said out loud, "If this is a joke, I'm done." But it wasn't a joke. Behind the fireplace, hidden in a hollowed section of brick, I found a metal box. The key fit perfectly. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Photos of my mother, pregnant, smiling, next to a man that wasn't my father. My breath stopped. The dates didn't lie. The timeline matched. I wasn't Edward Lawson's daughter. And the man I called Dad all my life knew it. Not only that, he raised me anyway. Lied to everyone. Protected a truth so heavy, I could barely stand holding it. And then, he ran. I sat on the cold wooden floor for hours, going through documents. Letters between him and my mother, legal papers, bank statements, and then, tucked beneath a stack of medical records, was another note. This one dated 6 months before my mother's death. If she ever finds this, I pray she forgives me. But I had to protect her from him, from that man. He wanted her to choose. I begged her not to tell. But secrets don't stay buried, do they? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there hollow. Because in that moment, I realized the $1 million wasn't stolen. It was payment. It was escape. It was blood money meant to disappear with. He was running not from justice, but from my truth. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people meant to protect you, you're not alone. Drop a comment and share your story. I read every single one. And if this story resonates with you so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're just getting started. I left the cabin that night with the box clutched against my chest like it held my last breath. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief. I'd spent my entire life trying to impress a man who never saw me as his own. And yet, he raised me, protected me from something I didn't even know existed. But why didn't he tell me? Why vanish instead of simply telling the truth? Was it guilt? Fear? Or had he never planned to disappear at all? The more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. My father, or the man I thought was my father, wasn't a coward. Distant? Yes. Difficult? Always. But he never ran from anything. Even my mother's death, he faced with quiet dignity, spending every night at her bedside until her final breath. So why now? Why this? I called the banks again, checked the account statements, reached out to every contact I could think of. Still nothing. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I contacted an old friend of my mother's, a woman named Lorraine. They used to teach at the same school, back when I was just a baby. She hadn't heard from our family in years. When I asked if she remembered anything strange, there was a pause on the phone. Then she said, "Your mom once told me that Ed wasn't your biological father, but she made me promise not to say anything. Said the truth would destroy everything." That was the moment I knew this story went further back than I imagined. So I asked her if she knew who my real father was, and she hesitated. Then she gave me a name, Martindale. I'd never heard of him, never seen a photo. Nothing in the box at the cabin mentioned that name, but Lorraine was certain. He was dangerous, she whispered. Your mother was scared of him. She told me once that he wanted custody, but Ed refused. Said he'd raise you as his own. And he did. My blood turned cold. Dangerous. What kind of man did my mother run from? And what had he done that made my father, Edward, take a child that wasn't his and vanish from a man like that? I found myself spiraling, not just through memories, but through identities. I didn't know who I was anymore. The version of me I had spent decades building felt fraudulent. What if I was born from a mistake? From fear? From something darker? I stared at myself in the mirror that night and whispered, "Who are you?" And the truth was, I didn't know. That's when I started receiving the emails. No sender, no subject. Just a series of short lines. Stop looking. You'll only get hurt. He left for a reason. At first I thought it was spam, some weird coincidence. But then, one message came with an attachment, a photo of me. That same week, taken from behind. I was at my office, walking to my car. Whoever it was, they were watching me. That's when fear truly took root. I stopped sleeping. Stopped leaving the house. I felt like I was being hunted by a ghost. Someone who knew more about me than I knew myself. So I did the only thing I could. I went back to the cabin. I tore it apart. Floorboards, walls, every crevice, and behind a loose panel in the attic, I found a second envelope. Inside was a flash drive. No note this time. Just the drive. I took it home and plugged it into my laptop with trembling hands. It contained only one file. A video. My father, sitting in a dimly lit room, eyes heavy with something I now recognized as sorrow. He spoke slowly, as if every word hurt. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. Either by choice, or not. That sentence hit me like a punch. He continued. There are things I couldn't protect you from anymore. Secrets your mother died with, and ones I carried alone, because I had no choice. He paused, then looked straight into the camera. Martindale is your biological father. But he's not a man. He's a storm. He threatened your mother. Threatened to take you. He had power, connections, things you can't begin to imagine. Another pause. Years ago, I made a deal. I paid him to disappear $1 million. It was everything we had, everything I saved. In exchange, he signed documents releasing all claim over you. But he's back, and I knew. The moment I sensed it, I had to run. He swallowed. Hard. I didn't run to save myself. I ran to distract him. He doesn't want you. Not for love or for fatherhood. He wants what you might become. Your mother had talents. She passed them to you, and that scares men like him. The video flickered. He looked older suddenly. I left you the keys to the truth. But you have to make a choice, sweetheart. Either keep running or face him. I'm sorry for everything I didn't say, but I never stopped loving you. Never. Then the screen went black. I stared at the monitor for hours, letting the silence fill the room like smoke. he didn't steal. The money, he sacrificed it for me, for the truth. And now, the man who gave me life wanted to take it apart. Have you ever uncovered a secret that changed everything? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. This story is just heating up, and what comes next will leave you speechless. After the video ended, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling like the floor beneath me no longer existed. I kept replaying his voice in my mind, the way it cracked when he said my name, the finality in his words, that strange, lingering fear in his eyes. I had to know more. If this man Martindale was as dangerous as my father claimed, I couldn't afford to walk blindly anymore. I started researching. He wasn't on social media, no LinkedIn, no company listings. But when I searched court records, that's when I found the shadows. Martindale was named in multiple sealed cases across 3 states. Charges, coercion, fraud, manipulation, defamation. None of them stuck. Witnesses disappeared. Plaintiffs dropped out. All silent, all afraid. That's when I knew I wasn't just tangled in a family secret. I was walking into something far darker. Something calculated. But I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, waiting for answers in the silence. I was angry. And anger has a way of turning grief into fuel. I remembered what my father said. In the video, your mother had talents. She passed them to you. At first I didn't understand, but the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. I had always known things before they happened. Small things. A phone call, a change in weather, the way someone's words didn't match their energy. I thought it was just intuition, that quiet voice inside, but maybe it was more. My mother was a writer, a painter, but there were whispers that followed her even before I was born. My grandmother once called her too sensitive, said she saw things others. Didn't she die before I could ever ask what that meant? Now, I was left to piece together the fragments. And then something happened that shattered everything I thought I still controlled. I got a phone call, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the message was chilling. amansvoice.com, elegant, rehearsed, Claire. You're looking for someone, so are we. Stop digging or we'll start. Click just like that. No threats, no screaming. Just an eerie certainty that told me they were watching again. They always had been. I took a breath, then another. My hands trembled. But this time, I didn't panic. I got in my car and drove back to the cabin one more time. Not to hide. To remember. I sat in the attic where I found the flash drive. Closed my eyes, focused on the memory of my mother, the way she used to hum when she painted, how she whispered, bedtime stories that always ended with women reclaiming power. And I realized the warning my father left me wasn't just about danger. It was about destiny. Whatever I was born from, whatever Martindale had planned, I had the choice now. To be hunted or to become the hunter. I started tracking down every person who had been connected to him in the past, former employees, estranged relatives, silent investors. Most refused to speak. But one woman, Jenna, a former assistant, agreed to meet. We sat at a crowded cafe, her hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. You don't know what you're doing, she said. He ruins people. He doesn't just take money, he takes control their lives, their reputations, their choices. He molds people like clay. I leaned in. And what did he do to my mother? She looked down, then quietly, he tried to claim you as leverage. Your mother threatened to go public. He retaliated in ways I can't even repeat. Her voice cracked. She was stronger than any of us, but she paid the price. I left that cafe with one name on a crumpled napkin, a private investigator who used to work in Martin's inner circle before going off the grid. I found him living in a trailer outside of Santa Fe. He didn't open the door until I said my mother's name. Then his eyes changed. He let me in. I warned Ed once, he said, pouring whiskey into a chipped mug. Told him the best way to protect a child is to disappear. Guess he listened. I told him everything I had found. The key, the box, the flash drive, the voicemail. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said, "You're not just some girl who got caught in a bad story. You were the story. You're what he wants. What he's been waiting for." Why, I asked. Why me? He hesitated, then handed me a photograph. Black and white. Faded. It was a group of men seated at a table, smiling. And in the middle, Martindale, younger, powerful, surrounded by what looked like politicians, businessmen, judges. This was the consortium. He said, a private network. Old money, old rules. And your mother, she infiltrated it with your father. They weren't just hiding you, they were trying to take him down. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All those years, I thought I was just a girl abandoned by her father. But I wasn't abandoned. I was hidden, protected, because I was the only loose thread in a system built on silence. And now, they wanted to snip it. If you're still with me, thank you. This story isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been silenced by family, by power, by fear. Leave a comment if you've ever been made to feel like you were the problem when all you did was survive. Subscribe to the channel now because what's coming next is the moment everything changes. I drove back from Santa Fe in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just the hum of the tires on the highway and the roar of questions in my mind. If everything the investigator said was true, then I wasn't just someone's daughter. I was a weapon. Not a person Martindale wanted to love, but one he wanted to possess. And suddenly, my entire life made a twisted kind of sense. The unexplained fear in my mother's eyes. The years of silence. My father's cold detachment. It wasn't absence, it was protection. They weren't punishing me. They were preparing me for this moment. I pulled over at a gas station just outside the city and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked different now. Not soft, not searching, focused, sharpened. I took out my phone, scrolled to the voicemail from the unknown number, and replayed it over and over, slower each time. There was a sound in the background, barely audible at first. A bell, faint, repeating. I isolated the audio and enhanced it using a free online tool. The pattern was unmistakable. It wasn't a digital chime. It was a clock tower. There was only one in my city that matched that rhythm. St. Emery's Cathedral. A place Martin had once donated to, according to old charity records I found during my search. I drove there, waited in the parking lot across the street for over 2 hours. At 7:13 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up. Tinted windows, no plates, and from it stepped a man I'd never seen in person before, but had memorized from the photograph. The investigator gave me Martindale. Older now, thinner, but still carrying that air of untouchable confidence. He walked slowly into the cathedral, alone. I waited 10 minutes. Then followed. The cathedral was empty. Just candles, cold marble, floors, and the faint echo of whispered prayers from a side chapel. I found him standing near the altar. He didn't look surprised. Claire, he said softly, you've grown. His voice felt like a scalpel. Precise, practiced, dangerous. I didn't speak. He turned to face me fully. I've been waiting for this day. Your mother was a difficult woman. Brilliant, but stubborn. She thought she could outrun her destiny. I clenched my jaw. She wasn't running. She was protecting me. From you. He smiled. She told you that, didn't she? Edward's version of the story? How romantic. He stepped closer. I didn't move. I never wanted to hurt you. He said, I only wanted you to understand what you are. And what's that? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. This belonged to your mother. She wrote it just before she died. She wanted you to know the truth, not his version. Hers. I took it with shaking hands. The envelope was old, the paper soft and yellowed. I opened it. The first line hit me like a blade. If you're reading this, Claire, it means I failed to keep you hidden. She went on. Martin isn't just a man. He's part of something that sees people as tools, assets. He tried to claim you because of what you could become, because he thought if he raised you, he could control it. But I knew better. I knew the moment you were born, you belonged to no one. Not even me. Tears blurred the words. Your father, Edward, gave up everything to keep you free. Don't waste that. Don't fall for the charm. Don't believe the story he'll spin. You were never meant to be caged. I folded the letter slowly, looked up, and said one word. No. Martin blinked. Excuse me, I stepped forward. I'm not yours. I never was. And I'm not going to live one more day in fear of a man who hides behind shadows and money. His smile vanished. I kept going. You chased my mother. You scared her. You ruined her life. And now you think you'll do the same to mine. You don't understand what you're walking into, he said, voice low, dangerous. I do. I said, I understand exactly who you are. I reached into my coat pocket and pressed the hidden recorder I brought with me. Every word he'd said, every slip captured. His face changed. Cold, calculating. I could end you, he said. You have no idea what I control. Maybe, I whispered. But I have something you don't. He raised an eyebrow. And what's that, people? Because what Martin never counted on was me talking. The investigators, the whistleblowers, the assistants, the women. I had gathered them all one by one quietly. And tomorrow morning, I would send everything I had to a journalist who'd been waiting for this story for over a decade. Photos, documents, testimonies, the network he built would fall like glass under fire, and he knew it. He stepped toward me, fury breaking through the mask. You think you're clever. You think this is justice. This is a mistake. You'll regret this. No, I said, you will. Then I turned and walked away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of silence because I wasn't alone in it anymore. If this part of the story hit something deep inside you, hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage to speak out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This isn't just entertainment. It's a revolution and it's personal. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I was alive. Every nerve in my body pulsed with electricity. For once, I wasn't stuck in the past. I was building something. I had direction, power, clarity. I sent the files to the journalist at exactly 6 a.m. Every photo, every recording, every name. I hit send with a single tap and watched the uploading bar crawl forward like a countdown to detonation. And then I waited 4 hours. The world was still, but in my chest, a storm was rising. At 10:32 a.m., the first message came in. Can you confirm the authenticity of the recordings? By noon, 3 other reporters were contacting me. By 3 p.m., it was trending on Twitter. Hashtag Martindale exposed, and by nightfall, the world knew who he was. It spread like wildfire. Leaked court documents, NDA violations, whistleblower statements, financial manipulation, witness coercion, secret donations to judges, prosecutors, blackmail schemes. His empire, pristine on the outside, was rotten to the core. I watched the live footage on my TV. News anchors stood outside Martin's corporate headquarters. Protesters held signs. Former employees came forward. Whispers turned into roars. But the most surreal moment came when I saw him live on camera, walking out of a black SUV with 2 lawyers beside him. His face was still calm, but his eyes were burning. They found me 3 hours later. I was sitting in my apartment, phone buzzing nonstop, when the knock came. Firm, rehearsed. I opened the door to 2 men in suits. One of them smiled too politely. Miss Lawson, we'd like to ask you a few questions. I said nothing. They stepped in, sat down across from me like they were guests, not threats. Where did you get the recordings? The taller one asked. From a conversation, I replied, with the man who threatened me. They glanced at each other. We're aware you've been in contact with journalists. Just know that leaking confidential material could. I raised my hand. No. What you want me to believe is that I've done something wrong. But what I've done is expose a criminal, one who's ruined lives for decades. The second man leaned forward. And what makes you think this won't backfire on you? I looked him straight in the eye, because I'm not hiding anymore. And I wasn't for too long. I lived in fear of a truth I didn't choose. I let silence raise me, let shame define me, let secrets dictate who I was allowed to become. But not anymore. I stood up. If you're here to threaten me, go ahead. Make it official. But I have everything backed up. Stored, copied, distributed. There is no undoing this. They didn't say another word. Just stood, straightened their jackets, and left. And in that moment, I knew I'd already won. Not because the fight was over, but because they were on the defensive now. I was no longer the hunted. I was the one who forced them out of hiding. That night, I drove to the only place I still felt connected to anything real. My mother's grave. It sat under an old oak tree, slightly weathered, surrounded by soft moss and wild violets. I knelt beside it, laid down the final copy of the letter she'd written me. I did it, I whispered. They know now. The world knows. And I'm not running anymore. The wind moved softly through the branches, like a breath held too long finally being released. And then, my phone rang. It was the journalist. I answered quickly. We just got confirmation. She said, Martindale's assets have been frozen. Multiple subpoenas issued. 3 former partners flipped. He's going down. Claire, this is bigger than we thought. I closed my eyes and felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. Not all at once, but piece by piece. What happens now? I asked. She paused. That's the thing. They're looking for someone to testify against him. Yes. And from everything you've told us, that person has to be you. It wasn't even a question. I'll do it, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every life he shattered, every voice he silenced, every woman like my mother who never got her chance to fight back. And suddenly, something strange happened. I felt proud of myself, not for exposing him, but for surviving him. If you've ever felt like you had to be quiet to stay safe, this moment is for you. Leave a comment and tell me what silence you've finally broken. You never know who you might inspire. And don't forget to subscribe. We're heading toward the climax. And trust me, the most powerful moment is still to come. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not physically, emotionally. Everything was sterile, polished, designed to suppress noise, feeling truth. I sat alone on the long wooden bench outside the hearing room. Fluorescent lights above hummed, like distant insects. The air smelled faintly of paper and floor wax. I stared at the subpoena in my hands, the ink still crisp. State versus Martindale, witness, Claire Lawson. I should have been nervous, but I wasn't, because fear had already come and gone. It came the night he disappeared with the money. The day I found the photos, the moment I listened to his voice on that flash drive, what I felt now was something different. It was ownership of my story, my name, my voice. A woman stepped out from the inner courtroom, the clerk. She nodded at me gently. They're ready. I stood, walked through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, everything changed. Rows of people, reporters, stenographers, cameras hidden behind courtroom sketch artists. A few gasps as I entered. I recognized none of the faces, but they all knew mine. And then I saw him, Martin, sitting at the defense table, perfectly groomed in his tailored gray suit, like nothing was falling apart, like the walls weren't already closing in. His face didn't move, not when I entered, not when our eyes met, but I saw it, a flicker, a shift, not fear, recognition. He knew I'd made my choice. They called my name. I walked to the front, swore my oath, sat in the witness chair. The prosecution began gently, respectfully. Ms. Lawson, can you tell the court how you came to be involved in this case? And so I told them. Everything I told them about the day my father disappeared. The box, in the cabin, the key, the flash drive, the letter from my mother, the man who watched me, followed me, threatened me. I told them about the network of fear, the people too afraid to speak and the ones brave enough to join me. I told them what Martindale tried to steal. Not just money, not just silence, but identity, legacy, autonomy. And I told them the truth. I was never his daughter, but I was always his target. The room was still. Even the judge leaned forward. The defense tried to discredit me, called my emotional state into question, asked about my motives. I stayed calm, steady, unshakable. Did you come here for revenge? One of them asked. No, I said. I came here to end the cycle, because if I don't speak, he'll just find another story to rewrite. They tried to rattle me, but they couldn't, because this time, I knew who I was. When I stepped down, I looked at Martin one last time, and for a fraction of a second, just one, I saw it, the crack. He wasn't in control anymore. He wasn't the puppet master. He was the man in a cornered cage. The next few days passed in a blur. Witness after witness came forward. The assistant, the investigator, financial analysts, lawyers, victims. Martindale was unraveling in front of the entire world, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. On the third day, the lead prosecutor showed the jury a letter signed by Martin himself, admitting to his plan to gain custody over me in exchange for a large financial settlement. It had been hidden, sealed away, buried in years of legal diversions. But now, it was exposed, as was everything else. The verdict wasn't swift, but it was absolute, guilty on multiple counts. Fraud, coercion, conspiracy, perjury, extortion. The courtroom broke into whispers as the judge read the sentence. 25 years, and even that felt too merciful. But I didn't stay to watch him be led away in cuffs. I left before that, because I didn't need to see him fall. I only needed to feel myself rise. Weeks passed, then months. The world quieted again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of secrets, the silence of peace. The cabin was mine now, legally transferred. I started fixing it up room by room, stripping away the past, keeping only what mattered. My mother's scarf, my father's pocket watch, a letter I framed and placed by the fireplace. One night, I sat outside beneath the stars, the fire crackling behind me, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. It was in that stillness I began writing, not for the world, for me. Pages and pages of what I remembered, what I had learned, what it meant to be the daughter of a lie, but the author of your truth. And slowly, a book was born. If this story moved you, if it echoed something deep inside, I invite you to speak. Tell your truth in the comments, not for attention, for liberation. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because these stories matter, because silence is a disease and we are the cure. I never imagined my story would echo so far beyond the walls of my own grief, but it did. The video of my testimony went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments, messages from women, men, survivors, daughters, sons, all of them carrying fragments of silence they never had permission to break. One message stood out. A woman wrote, "Thank you. I never knew I was allowed to speak until I watched you do it." That was when I realized my voice wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person who had been manipulated, gaslit, erased. That was the real vengeance. Not Martin's sentence. Not the fall of his empire. But the rise of all the voices he tried to smother. The ones that sang louder after the silence. And yet, there was still one last thread left untied. One last ghost I had to face. My father, Edward Lawson, the man who raised me, disappeared with $1 million, revealed everything, and then never came back. I had searched everywhere, checked every border crossing, every name change, every surveillance photo, nothing. It was like he'd vanished into smoke, like a man who never really existed. Until one morning, I got a letter. No return address, no signature. Just my name on the envelope, in the handwriting I could still recognize in my sleep. Inside, just one page, folded twice. No explanations, no apologies, just this. You did it. I'm proud of you. That's all I ever wanted. That you'd find your own voice before they stole it from you. I never left because I didn't love you. I left so you could grow without the shadow. You were never the secret, you were the reason. I read it 20 times before I let myself cry, and then I laughed, because even in his disappearance, he still found a way to be my father. Not perfect, but intentional. Quiet in his love, but never absent in it. I decided to publish the book 6 months later, not for profit, for clarity, for healing. I called it The Reason. In the dedication, I wrote, "To the ones who ran, to the ones who stayed, and to the ones who survived both." The first book signing was in a small local bookstore. I didn't expect more than a handful of people, but the line wrapped around the block. A woman approached me, maybe in her 60s, trembling slightly. She handed me her copy and whispered, "He told me I was crazy. For years, you reminded me I wasn't." I wrote my name inside, but more than that, I held her hand. Because sometimes survival doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with a hand on your shoulder and the words, "I believe you." And then one day, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a lawyer in Canada. They were settling a private estate, no details, no names. Just instructions, deliver this envelope to Claire Lawson. No substitutions. It arrived the next week. I opened it slowly. Inside was a title deed, a cabin in northern Ontario. Under my name, along with a bank receipt, $1 million. Transferred from an anonymous account, but I didn't need a signature to know. It was him, Edward. One last act of love. He hadn't vanished to escape. He'd vanished to wait. To wait until he was sure I no longer needed saving. Until I had saved myself. I stood on the porch of that second cabin. Month later, same type of trees. Same wind. Same quiet that no longer felt like abandonment, but like peace. Inside, everything was simple. 2 chairs, 1 photo. Me and my mother, years ago, laughing in a kitchen I barely remembered. And a note on the mantle, "If you ever find this, it means you found yourself first." If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of something inside you that's still healing, don't let it fade. Leave a comment, let others know they're not alone, and if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because here, we tell the stories that deserve to be heard. Loudly, fiercely, finally. It's been 2 years now. Since the trial, since the book, since I stopped running from names that were never mine. People ask me if I missed the chaos, if I missed the fire of it all, the adrenaline, the purpose, the high-stakes rhythm of justice unfolding in front of the world. And I don't, because what I found afterward was better. Quiet mornings, hot coffee, letters from strangers who call me brave, even though I never set out to be. A garden I started behind the cabin in Ontario, lavender, mostly. My mother loved the scent, said it smelled like clarity. Sometimes I sit out there with my journal and just breathe. There's no headline in that, no plot twist, just breath, life, choice. And yet, it feels like the greatest victory of all. I get emails sometimes from people asking, what would you say to the girl you were, the one before everything? And I always pause before answering because that girl wasn't weak. She was surviving. She was believing in shadows because she had no one to point her toward the light. But if I could speak to her now, the Claire who sat alone with a broken family, a broken truth, I'd say this. You are not broken. You were just buried. But roots grow in the dark. And one day you'll bloom in a way no one will see coming. Not even you. Sometimes I still think about Martin, about what it took to dismantle a man like him. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. I think about the people he never expected. The ones who found courage in my story. The ones who stopped apologizing for being angry. The ones who stood up and said, I remember everything and I'm not sorry. That's what he never understood. Control is loud, but freedom is quiet, soft, persistent, unstoppable. I got another letter recently. No name again. Just one line. I saw your garden. She'd be proud. No need to ask who it was from. He still writes like a ghost. But I no longer fear the unseen, because now I understand. Some fathers protect by being present. Others protect by disappearing. And the rarest ones do both. The cabin's porch light flickers on now with the motion sensor. A fox sometimes visits at night, curled up just beyond the fence line. I don't chase it away. It reminds me of myself, wild, cautious, but no longer lost. And when the wind rushes through the trees at just the right angle, I swear, I can still hear my mother's voice. Not in fear, not in warning, but in triumph. Telling me, you're not my shadow, you're my legacy. And you've rewritten the ending. If this story touched your soul, if you stayed until the very last word, you're part of something now. A community of truth tellers, survivors, authors of their own endings. Leave a comment below. Say the thing you've been too afraid to. Say this space is for you. Subscribe to the channel, share this story, help someone else hear the words they've been waiting their whole life to find. Because stories like this, they don't just entertain, they awaken, they liberate, and sometimes they save